Hey, what's up everybody, Isaac here with another New World video, and we are continuing our How to Tank series with a walkthrough of the M10 Dynasty, a gold run that we absolutely smashed. And we did that with a random group that was found on the group finder. And the group was so good that we ran a couple more. And we added each other, and we'll probably run a few more in the future, so that'll be nice. So let's go over what we're using. We're using the 5-piece expedition captain stuff. So probably showed you this before in my previous videos, but that's what we're using. And we're using a shield with void shield ward because this is a void mutation. And then these are the jewelry pieces we're using. I don't have a void protection amulet leveled up yet, so don't have one of those. This is what I'm rocking, and I would have the void gems in these two as well, but I just ran a barn, so I had to switch out some pieces of my gems for the fire protection on the barns run. But anyways, we got the sword and shield. You can go back to my first video to get an in-depth guide of my builds for that, or my second video which has another in-depth guide for the actual defender side that I actually ran for this dungeon. But hatchet build, went over that pretty significantly in the first video as well, so go back and check that one out. And most people, they tell you if you're a tank using a hatchet you throw in, but I guess they're right, because hey, not too many other weapons that you're using as a tank that you can throw with. But regardless, we are actually using Warhammer for certain parts of this run. I'm not afraid to use a different weapon when I feel it's the most appropriate weapon for the situation. So this is the hammer build that I'm running specifically for this dungeon. And we need knockdowns because we're using this at the barrels where we need to interrupt the enemies from going to hit the barrel. Problem is, you interrupt them and they still go and hit the barrel, so you need to interrupt them again. So we got Wrecking Ball, which knocks them down. We got Shockwave, which stuns them. And we got Path of Destiny, well, which doesn't do anything until you go down one ring on the ladder, and it adds Stagger. And then we go all the way to the bottom, and it helps reduce cooldown of the ability for every enemy that we hit. So all three of these abilities were going all the way to the bottom. Adds Weaken with the second one and expands the radius of the affected area. And this one grants Fortify on the second rung, and the last rung it expands the area. So obviously very important. The more enemies we can hit, all the better. And we absolutely want to get Aftershock for this specific build, and that means that we're going to have to take enough extra abilities, so 4 extra abilities beyond what we're taking here. So let's see what we're taking. Increased damage absorption by 10% if surrounded by 2 or more enemies within 3 meters. We have to take one of these two so we can get down to the next level. And reduce stamina consumption by 30% when blocking melee attacks. Not terrible for a tank, but we are rocking a sword and shield at this point. And occasionally I will actually run hammer and great axe, so I would potentially take this one instead if I'm going to run hammer great axe for that part of the fight. So great axe is great because you can get 3 more crowd control abilities, but you can't tank quite as nicely, obviously, with either your hammer or your axe. So taking this one because I'm going to block with my shield. Then reduce Warhammer cooldowns by 7% when using light attacks against targets with an active debuff. You could argue against this one, and that's because we're mainly going to try to be doing heavy attacks, but not bad to have in those few cases we're going to swing out a couple of light attacks. So definitely one you could switch out, but I'm running it. Deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. Pretty important, more damage, the more better. And heal for 35% of damage dealt when using a Crowd Crusher ability. We're using 2 abilities from the Crowd Crusher tree, so that's 2 abilities that are going to help us top off our health. Pretty nice to have when you're the tank trying to get the enemy to hit you as much as possible. And then that gets us to Aftershock, which whenever a target is affected by a crowd control effect is slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. That means they're going to have a hard time chasing down your DPS or your healer if they get aggro after you use an ability on them, or it's going to stop them from running after the barrel before they can get interrupted because they're going to be going slow, so you easily catch up with them. We'll cover the extra abilities we take from the left side. Gaining power on heavy attack, increasing damage by 20% for 4 seconds. Like I said, we're mostly going to be trying to do heavy attacks, and that's going to be a substantial increase in damage that we can output. Adds grit to Warhammer heavy attacks. That part's not that important because we're running 300 strength, which already gives us grit, but also grants 12% damage reduction while grit is active. And we're pretty much always going to have grit active while we're swinging our hammer, so that's not a bad perk to have. You know, we're the tank, so the more survivability, the better off we are. Increase heavy attack damage by 15% against targets under 30% health, so an extra nice chunk of increased damage to low enemies. So when they get low, we really just try to focus on finishing them off, and this is going to help us do that. Heavy attacks that hit reduce cooldowns by 7%. Another reason we're going to want to be using heavy attacks as much as we can, so we get 7% reduction here. And this one also gives us 7% when using against targets with an active debuff, which is pretty often. So honestly, this one will reduce it faster because light attacks you can hit faster, where heavy attacks they take a little bit longer. So either one you're doing is going to be alright. There's going to be different times, I guess, when we're going to do one or the other. But that way we know for sure we're constantly getting reduction either option that we take, and deal 35% extra damage for 1 second after taking damage, and we're constantly taking damage, so that's a substantial increase to damage output. So that covers that portion of the new updated build for a certain part of the dungeon that I'm going to be running. So that covers that, and let's jump right into the run. So first things first, make sure you're properly buffed up before you get going. Make sure your attributes are all in the right place. Make sure you got all the right armor on, all the right gems, all that good stuff, and we are good to go. First things first, taunt the first group of mobs, and we carry it on to the second group, hit them all with weaken, and we give them a good old taunt. The melee, they'll always come to the range, but the range, they won't come to you. So whenever you can, try to stack on the range. Oftentimes the range are very squishy, but they do a lot of damage. And they can take out your healer or your light con DPS very easily. So anytime you can, stack on the range. There's going to be situations here and there throughout different dungeons where you might not be able to stack on the range, so one DPS is going to have to go ahead and solo out that range player. So moving right along to the next stage of things, there's like 3 mobs that you can pull here if you want. We only pulled 2 of them, but it's nice to get a couple of these abominations out of the way. Nice and squishy, but they got some annoying abilities that can cause some problems for you. So just melt them down, get them out of the way, and then just go right in, aggro the next group, and melt the squishies nice and fast. All these swarmers, they do some pretty heavy damage pretty fast when you give them the chance, but they're squishy, so go right in, melt them right down, get them out of the way. And you're on to the boss. Constantly trying to aggro him, taunt him, add weaken when you can. And he does a pretty heavy slam here, so it's not much that you can do to stop your teammates from getting hit by that slam, but you just gotta try and keep his main aggro. So we get one more of those swarmers into the group, and just try to AoE him down with the boss. So you can see he does a lot of AoE damage that you can't really stop all of that damage from going to your DPS. You know, I guess when you are full defender side like I am, you could just sit there and block and do nothing else, and it'd help reduce some of the incoming damage to them. But next portion, we got a bunch of swarmers coming in, so we're trying to taunt them and take as much of their aggro as we can. You know, ideally it'd be best if the tank just kind of went in first and gathered them, but we have a strong group, so the DPS are saying, nah, we're just gonna go in and we're gonna start slaying things. So sometimes it gets a little bit messy, but you do kill things faster when you got really good, strong, aggressive DPS. So, you know, it's not like a massive mob group that's super dangerous, so we just go for it. The next part we're going to do in 2 separate pulls. You can do it in one big pull, but 2 separate pulls is the safe option. Definitely could probably handle 2 pulls with this group. So I hit the range guy, hit the musket, just to make sure that he focuses me. Come grab the rest of these mobs, and then we stack them up. And at this point, you know, I can't go back to stacking the musket, but I'm going to try and make sure that he keeps focusing me when possible. So ideally I'd like to stack on that musket, but just the way things worked out, I didn't get enough time to pull back around and go back to the musket. So not the end of the world though, we all survive, and our DPS are super strong, so they can go back and melt that musket player really easily. So the next musket did aggro on us, so I chuck a hatchet at him to hopefully grab his aggro. Throw my hatchet at the mobs kind of far away from us to call them all to us, gather them together, and pull out our hatchet to get our taunt back up, and we taunt everything. Keeping all the aggro on us. You can see, you know, as a tank player using hatchet, we are indeed throwing. You know, using my hatchet to throw and gather the extra mobs up works pretty nice. So anytime you can find a tank that throws, you know, I'd take advantage of it. But yeah, pretty basic. 2 nice easy pulls. Try to stack on the range if you can, but at the least, you know, make sure you do a little bit of damage to them so they focus you for the most part. Gather everything up and just mow them all down. And this part, you just gotta light the barrels on fire. And basically, just go wait at the door for your teammates. I think at this point we were still gathering, thinking maybe we needed to, so typically it's better if the DPS gathers so you can move along, but I am 300 strength, so I was hoping that I could one-tap this or a Chelcom vein, but it just wasn't happening. But nonetheless, after this run, we just started just ignoring all of the gathering resources, because for one, it seems to be bugged, 2, we just don't need them. So for this part, I just try to taunt everything and AoE it all down. You know, if you go and touch the stone, it's that way if somebody gets knocked, you know. Worst case scenario, if someone gets completely thirsted, they respawn right at the stone here. But if they get knocked, you're making sure that your down is refreshed. And if you get knocked, it's so easy to refresh your knock again. Just as soon as you get revived, you touch the stone. But nonetheless, we just group all of the mobs together here and just kill them nice and easy, nice and fast. Pretty clean pull on that one. And this next part, we got 3 bosses here. And for the most part, I start off just by taunting all 3 of them and grouping them all together. You know, if you can get a little bit of an initial start, some AoEing down on all 3 of them. But typically the DPS end up singling one out and, you know, melting down one at a time. But for the most part, I keep trying to keep the aggro on them. You know, even when they got one pulled to the side, I'll still taunt them. That way they'll try to range me down instead of attacking the DPS, hopefully. But, of course, there is still going to be some AoE that hits all the DPS and the healer. You know, no matter what, different mobs, they still have abilities that they're going to use to attack the others, even when you do have aggro. So if you can, tank at least 2 of these, pull them off to the side, and let your DPS smash down one of them. Focus down one at a time while you hold the aggro. Realistically, it's pretty easy to tank all 3 of these. if you're set up properly. And even easier to tank just 2 of them. So try to pull at least 2 of them to you and let your DPS melt down the other one. Fortunately, this guy has just a ridiculous amount of DPS. So all you can do is just keep on taunting, keep on DPSing. You know, he's got so much health that I try to throw in some extra DPS when I can. You know, of course, I'm chucking my rending throw at him, using my ultimate ability, extra nice 6k damage. Obviously nothing crazy significant, but every little bit helps. So ideally, I'm trying to keep doing damage to him, but I'm also trying to stay on the opposite side of the DPS. Sometimes when you get carried away, hatcheting away, you get carried behind him, and sometimes he can hit your DPS that way. So for the most part, I'm trying to be predictable and stay on one side of him. Trying to keep going with the DPS, but mainly trying to focus on controlling him to make it easy on the DPS, the guys that are doing the real damage, to keep melting him right down. So like I said, this dude is just super tanky, kind of ridiculous. Definitely overkill on the tankiness. I mean, he could be half the health, and at that point you've already proved that you can handle it. But I guess they just want a guy that's ridiculously tanky, just to make sure that you got enough DPS in your group. And this is the part that I'm going to switch over to my hammer. I already showed you my hammer build at the beginning, and the idea here is try to knock down the enemy, keep them from breaking the barrel. So typically I can stop the majority of the first wave by myself, and then I like when the DPS are kind of there to back you up. Typically you want 1 DPS on this far side, and 1 DPS kind of close to the barrel, and 1 DPS helping you with the main pull. So it's all about interrupting them. Obviously we haven't started that portion yet, and unfortunately my video cut out there. I was recording and I seen it quit recording. Luckily I seen that it quit recording and I was able to restart it. But anyways, we melt the boss down and we're getting ready to start the next phase of things. So typically I like to try and interrupt both sides with my abilities. Kind of only managed to get that one side, and then I got a good smack on the other side, but usually I like it if I can get the initial interruptions, and then the DPS, they're kind of there to save anything that gets past you. So we run into a little bit of a situation here. We didn't have any DPS guarding the opposite side of the barrel, so I had to go and interrupt them, and it got us into a tight situation because I lost aggro on the rest of the mobs. But reality is we didn't have much choice unless we wanted the barrels to get broken. So the way she goes, no big deal though. We got a strong group. Yo, probably got aggro because I had to go run to the barrel. Easily enough we can recover. Just letting my teammates know that, hey, you know, sorry you got knocked, but I had to do what I had to do. So could let the barrel break and redo it, but if we don't need to, rather not. And you can see these mobs, even though they're low on health, they've been aggroed, they've been tormented, we've done everything we can, but they still keep going for the barrel. So I go and get some hits on them, and I drag them back away from the barrel. The further they are away from the barrel, the better. Gives you more time to react when they do decide to go back to the barrel again. So you can see this is where the Path of Destiny comes in really nice. You know, we got that ranged attack. We can swing back and hit them back at the barrel even when we're sitting at this junction over here. Ideally, you try and block everything before it gets to this junction. Things get pretty hectic when that silence zone goes off and you're all stacked on the barrel and you can't use your abilities to interrupt them. So we managed to cut through it nicely, have one little rough bout of things, but other than that, we still managed to take it down quite nicely. And this next part can be quite a pain. Feels like just about every time you end up taking it down to the very end on this barrel. Got down to very low health. I think we had it down to one shot before we finally managed to, fend it off. So we just take all of these first groups of mobs, group them up, and we take them out. Kill the extra mobs before you get it started. Potentially you could start it first, but just kind of a mess, and you end up cutting it too close on this barrel anyway. So kill the mobs first before you start the instance. A couple of mobs at the end of the dock that you really don't have to pull. Doesn't matter, they kill super easily, so if you pull them, it's not like you're slowing yourself down really any. So finish off the mobs and go ahead and start the instance. And what I like to do is I like to use my Path of Destiny for the group at the door, and then I have my shockwave that I can come back and get the main group with. So the Path of Destiny, it allows you to range down those guys at the door, get some aggro on them from a long distance away, and then you have your close range attack, the shockwave, to get the main group with. So once again, you're just trying to go around, you're trying to do as much damage as you can, getting tags on the enemies. So just a tag on the enemy, it's going to help make them focus on to you. You can see the barrel's already super low. Crazy low. But we managed to sneak it off somehow. Low. You gotta be careful. So just a little warning that, hey, barrel's low. Gonna have to be extra careful on this one. So once again, we just get tags on everything. Try to hit them with some type of an interrupt, whether it's a stagger, a stun, or a knockdown. And it's right down to one shot. Barely even has any health on it. Doesn't really look like it even has any health on it, but we managed to pull it off. Definitely has gotten to be a pretty big pain on this one. These barrels kind of squishy. The mobs, no matter how many times you hit them, they keep chasing after it. So we still have a full wave to do, and the barrel is one tap. Can't let anything hit it, not even once. So we're trying to be aggressive, interrupt them before they ever have a chance to get to the barrel. We got taunts on them, you can see the 3 lightning bolts. But that doesn't always mean anything. Sometimes they still say, nah, I'm gonna go for the barrel. So not only is it enough to just taunt them, you gotta actually crowd control them with knockdowns, with stuns, with interruptions. Yeah, it was
one shot that whole time.
Yeah, that whole last round. Yeah, that whole last round. Just one single mob touches the barrel one single time, and we would have had to rerun that barrel. Sure, we would have had enough time to rerun it and still gold, but
here, let me switch.
Still,
one second. Let me switch back to.
Don't want to if we don't need to. So done with that part. Go back to the hatchet. Really no use for the hammer here. So we'll take the hatchet for the life save, for the taunts, and all of that good stuff. So pretty basic here. We taunt Isabella, add some weaken to her, and then we move out of the silent zone so we can taunt these mobs so they don't go kill our healer, don't go kill our DPS. And then we're back to Isabella, taunting her, making sure she's hitting us, not hitting our DPS, not hitting our healer. Of course, she still sometimes will pull out her gun and shoot at anybody and everybody else, but we melt her so fast that she doesn't really have time to do much. I don't know if this little strat even works anymore, but people always come and hide by this cage. It used to basically make those cannon shots that come in not land on you, but second round of the cannon shots, they still seem to come and hit you now, so not sure if it makes a big difference. Maybe it stops the first round from hitting you, which is a bonus, but that's the way we do her. So as soon as she goes into her animation, we come over to this first dog, and it's going to depend on your group. Different groups are going to do it different ways, so you're going to have to communicate with your group how they want to do it. So I pop a ward potion just to be safe. I'm tanking the dog. I pop my AoE taunt on him before he has a chance to chase anybody, and that makes sure I get his aggro. I try to hit him with a taunt, but I miss it somehow. So at this point, you know, just trying to survive, pop another taunt. And right now my DPS and healer are currently kiting and killing the other dog. So really good, really strong group. Good enough that they're able to just kite the other dog. You know, he's not too bad to kite because just the way he works, like you could just back far away from him, and especially if you're light, you can dodge far away from him. You know, but basically when he starts going through his animation, you just back up and he can't even reach you with his little breath move. So, you know, I'm basically trying to be a little bit aggressive, and I'm taking a little bit of extra damage, but you know, I could just be holding block and not take that extra damage. But just trying to be extra sure I'm doing extra damage, holding extra aggro, so he doesn't go and chase after our DPS or heals. So, this part can be tough if you don't have a strat down for it, but just communicate with your team. You're going to have to get a strat down, and it makes it pretty simple. You can have the healer trap the other dog, and everyone can focus on one dog that you're tanking, or you can get an off tank, which works well as well, or you can just have DPS and healers that are capable of kiting and killing the other dog. You know, it's not too hard to do, but a lot of squads don't like to do that. They prefer to have the healer trap the dog, and that way it makes it easy for the tank, you know, hold the aggro of the one dog while everybody kills it. In this part, we just pull this boss off to the side, back behind this building. Why do we do that? Because if you go right up to him, sometimes you're going to pull mobs out of the building. And just makes it easier. We don't need those mob kills. So let's just make it nice and simple and easy and kill this boss alone without having to deal with extra mobs. So pretty basic, just call him to you. Sometimes he still likes to run around, run away from you, but go grab him, chase him down, finish him off. So I think on this part, somehow, some way we managed to pull extra mobs, but basically pretty basic, get in the middle, taunt everything, and when you have gravity wells, it's super nice. See, a couple of extra mobs came running in from I don't know where, but seen them come in, so I had to pull out my taunt and get a good taunt on them. They were ready to chase after our healer, but not today. So typically this part's a little bit easier than this, but a few extra mobs ended up pulling, making it a little bit extra annoying, but still no real big problems. Pretty basic. Keep taunting, keep adding weaken when you can. If you get a chance, pull out your hatchet, throw some rend on them. But the main name of the game is you keep the aggro, keep your teammates alive, and keep the mobs hitting on you. And just like that, we are on to the last boss. Very smooth run so far. So all we gotta do now is take out the boss and we're good to go. So making sure I am coded up. I think for some reason, if you take a weapon out of its weapon slot, the coding comes undone. That's unfortunate. In my opinion, they should let you keep the coding countdown, even if it's in your backpack, but I guess they don't, so I had to recoat my hatchet. Should have done that earlier as soon as I pulled it back out, but just never got around to it. So obviously DPS are the ones doing the main damage, but every little bit helps. And with this boss especially, it's really so easy just to hatchet away at this boss. So you can just be continuously doing damage to this boss. You're not doing as much as your DPS, but it will still help reduce the time you spend on it. So once again, we're in a silent zone, so we leave it, and you know, we'd be a typical tank. We throw, we take out our hatchet and we throw. That way we can do a little bit of DPS to her, even when she's in the silent zone and it's about to explode. So we're just continuing to hatchet away. Taunt this group of mobs, and our teammates just mow them right on down. And unfortunately I don't have a taunt ready to go for the second group. Didn't time my taunts as well as I should have, but it's kinda whatever. This group of mobs is pretty basic. So you just mow them down. And typically what we do is we go into the corner. She's gonna throw more of those totem poles at us. And when we're in the corner, she's gonna throw them into the corner, nice and far away from all of us. You could sit and keep DPSing her and she'll drop them on her, and that's not a bad idea either, because they're still pretty far away, and that way you're getting some DPS done and save a few extra seconds of time spent. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to drag her all the way to this corner. Why am I doing that? Well, that way we are as far away as possible from all of the totem poles, so that gives you a little bit of extra reaction time. You know, when those dragons come out at you, you can see their path, but if you're right on top of them, it might not give you a whole lot of reaction time. But if you're a good distance away from them, it gives you time to react, time to see the dragons coming, and that way you can easily dodge them. So like I said, for the most part, I'm just trying to hatchet away at this boss. I think I might have to find a new recording program because it's been glitching out a little bit. You can see it's kind of been staggering off and on, and it cut out halfway through. But it gets pretty good quality when it's working, but unfortunately it staggers once in a while and crashes once in a while, so that's not ideal. But like you can see, still basically just hatcheting away, dodging when need to, hatchet when need to, get out of her death zone when we need to. But that's it, pretty basic. Hatchet her away, get her down, and good to go. 25-minute clear, M10 Dynasty with a random group. This was actually my second run with this group because we did so good on the first run that we said, hey, let's run it back again. So there you have it. M10 gold, 76k points. That's pretty darn good. 25-minute clear. And you can see it shows 0 out of 10 gatherables, even though we collected some. So something must be bugged out there. But it's whatever. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.